QuickBooks Pro Desktop 2021 Manual Payroll Setup. Let's get into it with Intuit's QuickBooks Pro Desktop 2021. Here we are in Get Great Guitars practice file. We have our open windows open. You can open the open windows by going to the view dropdown and selecting the open windows list. We're going to be concentrating down here in the employees section, focusing in on the payroll information. We want to set up the manual payroll process. Now note that the manual payroll and setting up manual payroll might be a little bit different from prior versions of the software. So we'll take a look at that process. Also note that as we go into it, I do not recommend using the manual payroll to actually process payroll in your business. I recommend doing some type of paid payroll because payroll is going to be somewhat complex. We'll go through some of those options after we think about the manual payroll, but just to list them, you can purchase the payroll option within QuickBooks, which will give you more support. It'll help you to basically calculate the payroll. You can also use a third party like an ADP or a Paychex for that as well. The manual payroll, however, is great for practice because it does actually make you not only enter the payroll in a similar fashion as the paid payroll would be in QuickBooks, but makes you manually put in the taxes, which is something that you don't really want. That's what I wouldn't want to do in practice because that's where you can make errors in practice for it. But it gives you a good idea to see what's actually happening when you process the paychecks, when you have to actually manually put in the payroll taxes. So there's a couple ways to get there in order to turn this on. We're in QuickBooks 2021. So we're going to go up top and we're going to go to the edit dropdown and to the preferences. Now we took a look at this when we went through the payroll options, but I just want to review it here so that we have the payroll and employees tab down here. We have two tabs up top, company preferences and the my preferences. We want to be in company preferences, and here's where you have it. So you have the full payroll, and then you've got the manual payroll. So you got to check this off in order to turn on the manual payroll. When you do so, QuickBooks is going to say, hey, we don't recommend the manual payroll. We do have a full payroll option, which again, I would recommend some type of payroll in your actual business, not actually calculating the payroll withholdings and so on manually. But again, great practice to do so for a practice problem, and it doesn't cost us any more to do that. And therefore, we're going to be working with just simply the manual payroll. We will be looking at another section after this practice problem that will look into more of the paid payroll. It may not be in the current version of the software, but it'll get into more detail on the paid payroll if you want to take a look at that. So we have this turned on. We're going to be then closing this out. You'd hit OK if you made the adjustment. I'm just going to close this out because I have made no adjustment. Now note that if you're in a prior version of the software, the old way that we had to turn on the payroll was actually through, or the manual payroll was through the help item up here. Now, if you're opening up your software and you only see like two icons and you don't have this nice little arrow, that would be an indication that no payroll has been set up, either manual or the paid payroll, and you'd have to set something up in order to use the payroll functions at all. So I'm going to go to the Home tab up top, and we go to the Help menu. So if you have something other than 2021, you may still be able to turn on the manual payroll by typing into the Help menu, manual payroll. And this is what we used to have to do, and then you'd have to click on some item down here if you're in a prior version, say the 2018 of the software, and then it would basically set it up from the Help menu at that link. So you actually had to go to the Help menu link to set it up. So I'm going to be closing this out. So now we have our arrows down here. We're going to set up a couple employees. Just a reminder before we do so, if you want to turn on the payroll, I would definitely talk to your accountant if you have an accountant or CPA firm to talk about payroll if you are to set one up. And just remember that to get advice about payroll, you may not want to go to the person that you're actually going to be buying payroll from to get advice, because their opinion is going to be compromised given the fact that they want the job of the payroll. So you might want to go to an independent CPA or accounting firm, ask them about payroll, and then go talk to the payroll providers to see what would be best, such as QuickBooks, such as like a third-party payroll. But your options are to turn on the payroll here, to have the full payroll, and you could do this. It is an add-on feature, so if you don't have payroll set up, then you can click on this icon just about any time, and QuickBooks will be happy to upgrade the payroll, and then you'd have these payroll options that you can take a look at. So it's kind of like an add-on type of feature. They have the 30-day free trial up top, which might be useful. It might be nice to work through a practice problem for that as well if you want to get used to the payroll. So I'm going to close this back out. Now, your other option on the payroll is to have it actually done outside of QuickBooks by a third party, which is quite common to do. And so you have companies that specialize just in payroll, since payroll has become somewhat complex and has become more of a specialty. It's not something that CPA firms used to oftentimes be handling payroll, but now other companies have kind of picked up the payroll. CPA firms often are going to be specializing in like audits and taxation. And then you often have other types of companies that kind of specialize in payroll. So that's how it's tend to be breaking out now. So, but if you were to look at a couple companies, and if you're thinking about talking about a third-party payroll, again, I would talk to an accountant first, and then think about any kind of options you have. ADP is one of the larger ones that you can consider what they do in terms of how that would go. And then Paychex. If you were to have them, some kind of outside company such as them, do the payroll, then you would still have to take that information and enter it in some way, shape, or form to your QuickBooks file so that it would be appearing on the financial statements as it should, even if you're not running the payroll through QuickBooks itself. So that in that format, you would use the third party for the supplemental information, the detailed data, breaking out all the information by employee and doing the issuing of the W-2s and all that kind of stuff. But you would still need the financial information to be input into QuickBooks, and you could talk about integrations with the third party, or simply manually do a journal entry to adjust your books to what has been processed by the third party payroll. Okay, so here we have our information set up. Let's go ahead and add a couple employees at this point. So I'm going to go into the employees down here, or you can go into the employee center up top and hit the drop down to the employee center. And it's going to look similar to like the vendor center and the customer center. I'm going to close this out. We have our list of our employees on the left-hand side. I'm just going to add a couple employees. I'm going to go to the new employee up top. We'll have a similar type of data input screen that we saw for the customers and vendors, personal information, address, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to enter in this information. I'm going to say we have Adam, and it's going to be Hamilton, and then it's going to print on the checks Adam Hamilton. If you'd like to reverse that, like Hamilton, Adam, you can adjust that there. And then we're going to say Social Security. This is obviously made up, 565. I'm going to say -65-5555, and then we'll have the gender. It's going to be male. Date of birth, we're going to say 09/05/79. Marital status, I'm going to say single. Now, the marital status will be important for the withholdings for the federal withholdings. It's going to be one of the factors that will typically be pulled into play. So we actually need the marital status. You might be thinking, well, yeah, why would I need this information from the employees? And it's kind of intrusive to get this information, but you're going to need it for the marital status. It'll be on the W-4. And notice a lot of this information, by the way, will typically be on the W-4. So the W-4 form is the form that the employee will have to fill out in order to get the withholdings to be an employee. And then you could take that W-4 and this information will typically be on it, including name, social security number, and date of birth, and so on and so forth. I'm not going to put in the ethnicity, and then disability. I'm not going to have anything. I'll say no. Disability, discrimination. I'm going to say the I-9. I'm going to say yes. On here, work authorization expires. I'm not going to put anything. And then we have military. I'll say no on the veteran for the military. So then we have the address. We're going to enter the address. So we're going to say this is going to be 1231 Lago Vista Drive in Beverly Hills, California 90210. That's a made-up address again. So, and that's a home for sale. If you want to purchase that, $27 million or so, Beverly Hills. Anyway, so we got main phone. I'm not going to put in the phone number here, but obviously we want the contact information and the email information. These are not required fields to fill out the payroll process, but obviously we would want those for our data input purposes. The work phone, mobile phone, and so on and so forth. Again, not required fields, but could be useful for informational purposes, just as they would for the customers and vendors. Emergency contact information down below. Again, I'm not going to put anything for the emergency contact information. Would be probably necessary for human resource purposes for payroll. in practice. So the account number of employee ID, I'm not going to put anything for the additional information here. And then we're in the payroll information. Now this is the information that we would put in play in order to basically process the payroll. So we have pay frequency. Now this will change from company to company. How often do we pay the employee? Do we pay them daily? Do we pay them weekly? Bi-weekly would be, twice a month, so there'd be 24 payments. Bi-weekly would be every other week. So there would actually be 26 payments, and that's a little bit different. That's a little bit confusing. There's 52 weeks in a year divided by 2. 52 divided by 2 would be, 52 divided by 2 would be 26 payments, whereas the semi-monthly would be twice a month, and there's only 12 months, so that 12 times 2 would be 24. So these two are actually different in terms of the number of payment periods that will be in there. And then monthly, you pay them monthly, quarterly, or annually. So obviously, daily is not very common. Weekly, somewhat common. Bi-weekly, very common. Semi-monthly, probably a little less common than the bi-weekly. And then monthly that we'll have here. So I'm going to pick up monthly for our purposes, and we'll enter the payroll basically twice for our practice problem, or at least think about it 2 times. Now, we're not going to set up direct deposits up top. We're going to go down here to the earnings, and let's think about the earnings that we could have. Now, we could be paying these employees either hourly or salary. Those are going to be the 2 common categories. Either we have a fixed salary amount, or we're going to track the hourly rate and then pay them hourly. So I'm going to try to set one up for salary, and then I'm going to say tab. It's going to be salary is not a payroll item. I want to set up the payroll item. So I'm going to say, go ahead and set it up, please. And then we have our option. Here's a little option window to set this up. Now, this is going to be hourly wages. No, I'm going to say annual wages. This is going to be salary. I'm going to put it in there as an annual wage. I'm going to say next. Regular pay. Is this item for regular overtime? I'm going to say it's regular pay. And then it says enter the name of the salary item. I'm just going to call it salary. That's what the item is going to be named. Next. And then enter the account for tracking this expense. I'm going to put it to the payroll expense. That's going to be on the income statement. So that's where the expense will be recorded on our books when we pay the employee the salary. So we're going to say finish. And we have that. Now it says hourly annual rate, or hourly / annual. We have an annual. I'm going to put 60,000 a year for the salary. So if I pull up the giant calculator, we're going to pay them 12 times. So if I have 60,000 divided by 12, that would be about 5,000 per month. Actually, I'm going to change that to 55,000. 55,000. Sorry, Mr. Hamilton, I messed that up. It's 55,000. We're going to say 55,000, and then if I divide that by 12, that would be about 4,583 each pay period. Now I'm going to go up to the taxes item up top. So I'm going to hit the taxes item. Now we have federal and state. So the state will differ from state to state. We're going to take this information once again from the W-4 form. So we got the W-4 2019 and prior. Now note there's going to be a difference in terms of when the employee was hired. So we got to say, were they hired 2019 or prior, or 2020 or later? I'm going to say 2020 or later here, and then it says, you selected the federal W-4 2020 and later form. Note the following before you proceed. Hire date of the employee must be on or after January 1st, 2020, or they would like to adjust their withholding amount. It's suggested that you complete payroll run for this employee for the year 2019. After you enter and submit the information, you'll not be able to revert federal W-4 2019 and prior form. So I'm going to say okay, because we're going to be moving from this information for January 1st, 2021. So filing status, that's going to be necessary because we need that. So I'm going to say single or married, filing separately. And then we have this is going to be from the W-4 form now. 2 jobs only. If there are only two jobs total, you may select this box. So if there's 2 jobs, we could select that. Then we have dependent information. This would come from the W-4, the claiming the dependents. And then if there's other income, we have the other income, deductions, and extra withholding. So notice the W form has changed a bit because obviously in the current time period, there's a lot more factors going on to try to estimate what the taxes are than it used to be. It used to be you have a 1-income household and you had the same job for the entire year, most likely for most people. But that's not really the case now. You could have multiple jobs, and multiple people in the household could be having the job. and have multiple jobs, in the household. So it's a little bit more complex to fill out the W-4, but it will be the responsibility of the employee in order to do that, and then we'll take that W-4 and put it into place. So we have subject to Medicare and Social Security taxes. Those are the primary payroll taxes that most people think of. So those are not income taxes. Those are going to be, tacked on over and above the income taxes, meaning when you file the 1040 at the end of the year, you typically think of federal income tax, but you're also paying when you have a withholdings, the Social Security and Medicare tax as well. So we have those, and we have the federal unemployment tax, and they'll be subject, of course, to federal income tax as well. So we will be withholding from their paycheck federal income tax, Medicare, Social Security on the Fed level, and then the federal unemployment tax is going to be paid by the company. So that'll be another tax, but it'll be paid on the company side of things. Let's go to the state information. I'm going to say California for the state information, SUI, state unemployment, SDI. I'll keep those two items here. And then state work, state subject to withholding. I'm going to say California. I'm going to set up the setup wizard. So enter the name of the state withholding tax, California withholding. And we're going to say enter the name of the agency. I'm going to just call it the franchise. Let's call it, that's not it. Franchise Tax Board. I'm going to call it California. And so this is just a practice problem to set this up. This is going to be a vendor that we're going to be paying. The Franchise Tax Board is not on the vendor list. We're going to add it to the vendor list. That's who we're going to pay the withholdings to. Enter the number that identifies you to the agency. Now this would be kind of like your identification number, but it would be on the state side of things. So I'm going to just see if they can get away with just entering a fake number here. Liability account. So the liability account, it's going to be accumulating when we take it out of their paycheck, like the other withholdings, into our payroll liability account until we pay it to the agency we need to pay, which will be the Franchise Tax Board. And so we're going to increase the liability. That's good. And then select the item subject to this state withholding. We're going to say the salary. So that looks good. I'm going to say finish. And you can now set a schedule payment for this payroll. So I'm going to say, okay, great. So California, single as well. Allowances, I'm going to keep it then at 0 for the allowances, and the estimated deductions, I'll keep that where it is as well. And then on the other side of things, I'm just going to set up the unemployment as it's indicating me to do. Once again, it gives you a little wizard. Enter the name for the company paid. So that's going to be the California unemployment. That looks good. And so enter the name of the agency. It's going to be a California, so I'm going to call it the Franchise Tax Board again. Franchise Tax Board number. I'm going to enter a number again. This is not like a fake number, just to run through the payroll. Just to note that the state will change from state to state, but note that you will have to deal with the state taxes depending on the state that you are in. So the liabilities, it's going to be accumulating in the payroll liabilities, and then on the income statement side, it's going to be the payroll expenses. So I'm going to say okay. Here's the rates that have been generated. I'm just going to basically keep the rates here. Now these rates might be custom from company to company. So these are rates that they may be different. So you want to make sure that you're picking up the correct rates. I'll keep these as the default. So I'm going to say next. And so there we have that, and it says finished. All right, and you are now ready. So good, great. And then California disability is not in the payroll item list, so I'm going to set it up. And so now we have the California disability. This is another California item that needs to be set up. Again, I'm just going to set up the same vendor here. So I'm going to say Franchise Tax Board. This is just a practice problem. I'm just setting up a vendor. So you want to make sure you're picking up the correct vendor to line up with your state. But we'll just go through the practice problem. I'll say an account number once again. Similar process. We've got the payroll liabilities. That's going to be the liability that will be accumulating when we pay the California disability tax. And then we're going to say next. Here's the rate provided for us. So I'm going to keep the rate. I'll say that's good. Next, and finish on that one, and okay. So let's say okay and okay. So there we have these set up then. I think that'll do it. I'm going to say okay. And so now that is good. I'm going to go to the employee info. So employee info, employee dates. We have the date of hire. I'm going to say on 01/01/21. So I'm just going to say at the start of our business. So we're going to have that original hire date 01/01/21. Adjusted service date. I'm going to keep that. Release date. Employee details. Employee type. It's going to be a regular type of employee. So we'll keep it at regular. Full or part-time, we're going to say full-time here. Seasonal, no. Exempt, non-exempt. So are they exempt from withholdings? No. Key employee, I'm going to say no. And then job title, we can put the job information and title here. I'm not going to enter all that data. Leave of absence, we can enter data, and then the termination information upon termination. Okay, so that looks good. Let's go ahead and say okay. And then, do you wish to set up payroll information for sick and vacation, which would be common oftentimes because it was sick and vacation may be required by either Fed and or the state. But I'm not going to be dealing with the sick or paid vacation at this point. So I'm going to say leave as is. And so there we have our first employee. Let's do one more employee, similar process. So I'm going to go new. I'm going to add another employee. This one's going to be named. So we're going to say this is going to be Erica. I'm going to say Smith. And that's how it's going to see in the paycheck. I'm just going to make up a social security number. And gender is going to be female. Date of birth, I'm going to say 12/31/79. Marital status, I'm going to say married. Citizen, we're going to say yes. Ethnicity, I don't need it. Disabled, I'm going to say no. On file, yes. And no on the veteran. So I'm going to say no. So there we have that. And then I'm going to go to the address. The address, she also lives in Beverly Hills. So we're going to say 9425 Sunset Boulevard. And this is going to be in Beverly Hills, California. 90210. That's also a home for sale. $29 million if you're interested. Then we're not going to put in any of the phone number or that information, emergency contact. We're not going to put any information there. It would be useful to have, obviously, in practice. We're going to go to the payroll information. We're going to make it monthly again. So we're going to pay her monthly. And so our payroll will line up, but she's not going to be a salary employee. We're going to say hourly. So we need to set up an item for hourly. So I'm going to type in hourly, set up the item. Say set it up, please. It's going to be hourly. That's what we want instead of annually that we did last time. I'm going to say continue. Regular pay, that's what I want. And then it's going to be hourly. That's going to be the name of the item. Good. And then it's going to go to the payroll expense when we have the expense. That's good. When we record the expense, when we pay her, we're going to say, okay, that looks good. And then the rate, I'm going to say $20 an hour. $20 an hour. And then we're going to set up the taxes up top. So let's set up the taxes. So we have, once again, the I-9. Let's make it, she's going to be 2020 and later as well. So we're going to say, okay, that makes sense. We're going to say filing status was married filing joint this time. I'm not going to put anything for the dependents, the other income, or the deductions. That information would be gotten from the W-4 form if you had it. And then you got the Medicare and Social Security, subject to Medicare and Social Security, like pretty much all employees will be for the most part, unless you're like a government employee or something like that. And then the federal unemployment tax, yes, so we're going to keep that. If we go to the state side, we're going to say she's also in California. We're going to be subject to SUI and SDI, so that's good. And then California here, once again, we're going to say she is married, let's say married 2 incomes. And then allowances, I'm not going to put anything there. That would come from the W-4 if you had that information as well. Other, I'm going to say other employee training tax. I'll keep that as well. And then if I say okay, so there we have Erica set up. So I'm going to say okay. And it says, do you wish to set up the sick leave again? I'm going to say no, I'm not going to set that up. And we'll get into more detail on a payroll problem again if you want to take a look at our payroll problem after this section. And we have a payroll course if you want a little bit more detail on just simply payroll. But there's our 2 employees now, so they've been set up here. You can also run reports, of course, with those employees. If I close this back out then, and open up this tab. Now we see the home page is the one that we are on now. In employees down below, we can enter time for those employees. If we're tracking the time in the system, the time can then be used to, one, pay the employees, but also two, to help us to bill our invoices when we make our invoices. When we actually pay the employees, we'll typically use this icon here. So we'll select this one to process the payroll. We'll get a screen such as this, and then we can use this to basically enter the data. If I go on here, you can only view paychecks for employees who have been checked. So let me check it. If I check this off, then we have the information for the employee. And notice this data input screen will be the same if you have a paid payroll or not. The difference is that these items down below, the Medicare, the federal income taxes, they're not being calculated for us by the system. That's the difference between the manual payroll and a paid payroll, or one of the differences. We will have to manually input this information. But the fact that we do have to manually input this information makes it better, because then we can understand it better, because we'll have to manually input the information and we'll see what's actually happening to do that. So it's actually really good for practice. So I'm going to close this back out. And then I will close this back out. Once we enter that data, then we will have liabilities, because we will be taking money from the employees out of their check, withholding it because the government forces us to, and we'll have our portion of Social Security, Medicare, and whatnot. Those things will accumulate in the liabilities section here, and then we'll have to pay those liabilities, paying the Fed, the government, the federal government, and the state government. Our major focus is going to be on the federal government, because that blankets the entire country. The state, I just want to show that we have set up the state, because you will have to set up the state depending on the state that you are in, but the state and locale will differ from place to place, and you'll have to get a little bit more specific on what those differences will be. I want to focus in on the Fed because it's going to be more blanketed, of course, for the entire country.